Hey everybody, Jason Blaha here with Ice Cream Fitness. Today I want to talk to you about the topic of clean bulking versus dirty bulking and what that means. Well, let me give you guys a bicep shot. Oh, I wanted to point out real quick also because some people had commented in my thing that my left bicep was lagging, and let me show you guys a bit of a close-up there so you can see my scar. Um, actually, 8 years ago, I had a full bicep tear. My bicep completely retracted up like a tennis ball, and I had to have it surgically reattached. So I'm always going to have issues with the left bicep lagging a little bit. My left is actually stronger than my right because I do only dumbbell work, and for a while I was doing more sets with my left than my right. So performance-wise, like with a straight concentration curl, I can actually do more reps with the same weight with the left than with the right. But size-wise, I'm always going to struggle with that. There's not much else I can really do to fix it. So again, I just wanted to clarify that for anyone who was curious as to why my left arm is a little smaller than my right. All right, on to the topic of dirty bulking versus clean bulking. Again, this is kind of a term that people have used to come up with because there's people seem to gain differing amounts of fat on a bulk, and there's different strategies in this. So this is a term people have used to try to describe the amount of fat that people gain. When they're bulking, and also the reason that also needs to be brought up is that for most people, a lot of people will say things like, "Oh, I want to get ripped and big at the same time," or "I want to lose muscle and gain fat at the same time." And I hate to tell you guys, but the reality is, outside of the rank novice or people using drugs, the vast majority of people will not be able to gain appreciable amounts of muscle mass while losing fat. It's not realistic. And in the real world, I mean, most people who try to do both actually end up just spinning their wheels for the next 6 months and have the exact same physique they started with. So and I'll even go so far as to say for most people who've been training for a little while, and they've hit plateaus and things already, that you might not even be able to gain appreciable amounts of muscle mass without gaining fat at all. Like not even keeping your current body fat. For many people, you're going to have to overeat enough to gain body fat in order to gain muscle, and that's just again being realistic for people who are drug free, and doing this natural. That is just living in the real world. You have to come to terms with that. It's the way it is. So now, that being said, what do we mean by a clean bulk versus a dirty bulk? And again, what we think of as a clean bulk is when someone gains very, very little fat versus the amount of muscle they gain. They have a really high gain of muscle to fat when they're bulking, whereas in a dirty bulk, well, people gain a lot of fat. And some people try to describe that by saying, well, it's how clean your diet is. But if you've watched my other videos and seen the science and things I've presented, you already know that individual food choices have zero impact on your body composition outside of their macronutrients and their caloric value. So that being said, your food choices, in that regard of how processed or refined they are, or how micronutrient rich, has zero measurable impact on body composition. So that definition doesn't make any sense. It's generally accepted then in circles for people who really understand how body composition works that once you've determined your maintenance calories, which again is how many calories you need to maintain your body weight at your current stats and activity level. It's how many calories you burn a day. So if that stays neutral, then you don't gain or lose weight. So we call that maintenance. And you can find that at bodybuilding.com in the nutrition forum stickies, or you can Google various calorie calculators online that will get you really close and into the ballpark of what your maintenance is, by plugging in some calculations, and there are ones that actually do the work for you. You just plug in your own numbers and they'll spit the info out. So it's pretty hard to get a baseline maintenance, to at least get you a good idea of what your maintenance probably is. And we define then a clean bulk as when you only consume 10 to 20% of a caloric surplus. That would be a clean bulk. And if for example, if your maintenance is 3,000 calories a day, which for someone with a decent amount of who's built a little bit of muscle mass up, they train hard, that's not an unreasonable maintenance number. So if that's the case, then 10 to 20% over that would be 3,300 to 3,600 calories. So again, for that person, about a 300 to 600 calorie surplus. That would be a clean bulk. You're not going to gain a lot of body fat. You're going to gain a high ratio of muscle to fat out of the weight you gain if you're training hard enough to stimulate new growth. And so we would call that a clean bulk. And then a dirty bulk would be anything exceeding a 20% caloric surplus. So again, in that case, again, anyone eating over 3,600 calories a day is dirty bulking. And you may even find with some really skinny types, with low body fat who are underweight, that even the dirty bulk, they may not even gain an appreciable amount of body fat. So let's get into the question of who these are for. I would say that the dirty bulk is definitely the way to go if you're underweight, you're a skinny novice particularly, and you're weak, and you get on a proper heavy barbell program. A dirty bulk is the way to go. You're probably if you're 5'9" and 140 pounds, and you go on a dirty bulk on something like similar to even the routine I prescribe for the novice, and you go even 20-25% caloric surplus, you're probably not going to gain very much body fat, and you're going to gain a lot of muscle mass. And even if you do gain a bit of body fat, you're that individual, training hard enough is probably still going to look better, even if they gain a decent amount of body fat, just because they're going to be carrying so much more muscle, and then they can always diet it off in the future. It's also really useful for, again, people wanting to get into powerlifting, people who need to gain a lot of strength very quickly. The dirty bulk can work, or even people who just they want to get as big and as strong as possible, as quickly as possible. Um, and they don't mind spending the extra time later to diet down. The dirty bulk is the way to go for them. The clean bulk is generally just for anybody else. I mean, if you're concerned with aesthetics and you want to, gain muscle quickly, and efficiently, but you don't want to gain a great deal of body fat, and you want to keep the body fat gains to a minimum. Again, the clean bulk is generally what you should be doing. And again, I would stress that the skinny novice doesn't need to be doing this shit. And the reason for it being, people who are obsessed with, I'm going to keep my ripped abs, but I want to gain a lot of muscle, again, are delusional. It doesn't work that way. Your odds of doing that are slim to none. So in that case, they need to just, that individual needs to forget that. If you have a lot of muscle that you need to gain to reach your goal, um, running a really, really small caloric surplus might not be the way to go. But, if your goal is just to gain, again, over the next year, you've been lifting for a little while, and you're trying to gain 5 or 10 pounds of muscle over the next year, I mean, the clean bulk is going to be the way to go. And for some people, I mean, that's even unrealistic of a goal. Once you reach a certain level of advancement, you're never going to gain 10 pounds of muscle in a year natural, once you've reached a certain size threshold. Or if you're at the size I'm at right now, if you're where I am, you're not going to gain 10 pounds of muscle in a single year without drugs. It's not going to happen. It's not realistic for the more advanced lifter. So again, these are the individuals that the clean bulk is really ideal for. Anyone who's really incapable of gaining from where they're at, more than 10 pounds of muscle in a year. I would say the clean bulk is the way to go, because I mean, you may have to gain some body fat. You're probably not going to recomposition, but you also want to minimize it. And and again, on a clean bulk like that, your goal is generally to gain 1 pound or less per week. And even that can end up being a decent amount of body fat, because quite frankly, if the point where you're at in your development that you're only going to gain half a pound of muscle in a month, or 6 pounds of muscle in a year, a pound a week is still going to be mostly body fat. But, and again, that's okay, because, you can bulk for, 3 to 6 months, and then spend 3 months cutting, and be right back at the body fat you were with a few more pounds of muscle. So again, it's realistic for these people. Even if you're going to gain a little body fat. And again, what you'll oftentimes find, without enough of a caloric surplus to be gaining body fat, a lot of individuals are just going to struggle to gain any muscle mass or appreciable strength in order to stimulate new muscle growth or anything. So again, it's, for many individuals, it may be necessary to have to gain a little bit of body fat while they're gaining muscle, and it's just unavoidable. And so again, the idea is just to minimize it so that you can can trim it down later. So in short, I'll clarify again, what a clean and a dirty bulk is not the amount of food choice, not your individual food choices, but how much fat you gain, and it's generally defined, or how much fat to muscle you're going to gain on a bulk, and it's defined by how large of a caloric surplus you're eating. Because at the end of the day, that's really what's going to determine weight gain. And again, weight gain is going to be usually relevant to how much fat and muscle you're gaining. If you're gaining more weight than you're gaining muscle by any appreciable amount, it's going to be fat. So, and again, a clean bulk is consuming a surplus of 10 to 20% over maintenance, and a dirty bulk is consuming anything over that. And I hope this is informative. Let me give you guys another bicep shot, and I'll talk to you next time.